It feels a bit strange to call an 8-7 team a disaster, but honestly, the Minnesota Timberwolves are looking like kind of a disaster. I think there are some things brewing in Minnesota that are not what you want to see out of a team that just made the conference finals and was not that far away from playing for an NBA title last season. This team feels like they've taken a step backwards, not taken step forwards, and it's just not a good start to the season in Minnesota. Tonight's loss feels like the culmination of a rough start to the season. A loss to, I'm going to be honest, a competitive but bad Toronto Raptors team that admittedly did have Scotty Barnes back, and RJ Barrett's played well, and Grady Dick's been a good player, although he wasn't great tonight. Like, this was a bad loss, though, plain and simple, against a team that you should win against, that should be, honestly, a free win. Not a free win. No, there are no free wins in the NBA, but about as close to a free win as you're going to get. I mean, at the end of the day, the Raptors are 4-12, and they're about the most ethical tank job that any team is doing in the NBA, but they're not really, I mean, their players are obviously trying to win, but they're not a team that's particularly competitive. And this was a bad loss, and not just a bad loss on the court, but there was some other stuff going on tonight between Gobert and Ant and Julius Randle that was just not the stuff you want to see from your stars. Not to mention Naz Reid gets hurt tonight as well. Not entirely sure if that's a major injury. I don't believe it's going to be, but there are some serious concerns with this Minnesota Timberwolves team to this point in the season. So before we hop into the video, if you haven't already, make sure y'all hit that subscribe button. Help me push towards the 1,000 subscriber mark on the channel. Uploading every single day, tons of consistent daily NBA content, and would really appreciate it if y'all do subscribe. Trying to get monetized on this channel. With that being said, without further ado, let's hop right into it. So first things first, number one, I hope Naz Reid's injury is not serious. There's no confirmation as of yet whether or not it is or not. But the biggest issue that I have with this Timberwolves team is that there just seems like a lack of cohesiveness. Obviously, the interactions between Randle, Gobert, and Ant tonight were not pretty. Gobert posting up, sealing off underneath the rim, trying to get a pass with about 5 minutes left to go in the game. Randle completely looks him off, and Gobert winds up getting an offensive 3-second because he doesn't get out of the paint quickly enough after Randle doesn't throw him the ball. And then with 10 seconds left, they're down 5, and Randle just throws basically a steamer right at Gobert underneath the rim because he's annoyed. He's like, it was one of those here, bam type passes, and Gobert fumbles it and turns it over, and Randle just slumps his shoulders and walks away. And it was just like the body language of this team and their chemistry doesn't seem great. Anthony Edwards looked like he wanted to smack Gobert for not getting out of the paint quickly, not hustling out of the paint after he didn't get the ball into the rim. And look, Gobert's not the best finisher in the league. We know he at times struggles against smalls, but Randle should have thrown that pass into him. And that's going to be a highlight that circles around a lot, I think, over the next couple of days. Randle should have thrown that pass to him, yes, but you can't pout like Rudy Gobert did. You just can't. It's not the right way to play. And look, I honestly think Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle have both been really good. If there are players to blame for the poor start by this Timberwolves team, I don't think it's those two guys. I mean, Julius Randle's shooting 51, 38, 83 to start the year, averaging almost 22 a game. He's having a really nice start to the year, playing super duper well, has been a great addition for this team, honestly. And surprisingly, the best addition from the trade that they traded away Karl Anthony Towns. We'll get to Dante DiVincenzo here in a little bit, but Anthony Edwards is playing like a superstar, shooting still over 42% from 3 to start the year. Had another great game tonight. I mean, he is playing awesome. He's averaging 28, 5, and 4. The turnover numbers are still too high. I think they may always be too high. I mean, it's still early in his career, but he does turn the ball over too much. He's not an elite level playmaker. His decision making with the ball in his hands can be questionable, and that's probably his biggest flaw. But he's still having a very efficient start to the season and playing really, really good basketball, shooting the most threes of his career by a pretty significant margin, and doing so at a very efficient rate. It's really good stuff to see from Anthony Edwards. My biggest concern is their two best players, and Ant and Randle, are playing really well, and yet they've lost 4 of their last 6. And not only have they lost 4 of their last 6, 3 of those 4 losses were to the Raptors and the Trailblazers twice. That's unacceptable. Those are the games that are supposed to be gimme games, especially in a tough Western Conference where you're just not going to get many easy games. You have to take advantage of those types of opportunities, and they have not done that. I mean, they have a couple of decent wins. They beat Sacramento twice. They have one good win over Denver early in the year. But outside of that, their other wins are against Chicago, Charlotte, Portland, Toronto earlier in the year, Phoenix without KD and Beal. Like, just not the most impressive wins to start the season, and some rough losses to stack on top of it. And look, the schedule doesn't get easier. I mean, the next few games, they got Boston, Houston, Sacramento, the Clippers, the Lakers, Clippers again, Golden State twice, New York, Golden State again. Atlanta's a decently easy game, but then Dallas on Christmas. I mean, then they close out December with Houston, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, and start off January with Boston. Their next 15 to 20-ish games are honestly kind of a gauntlet. And this was the stretch where they should have been winning these games. Like, these are games they should have at least won 3 of these last 4 games, if not all 4 of them. And they're all of a sudden putting themselves in a kind of a precarious situation in the Western Conference, because if this stretch that's coming up here continues to go poorly and there continue to be some cohesiveness and chemistry issues with this team, then you really start to have real concerns, I think, about the season for the Timberwolves. Because look, 8-7 in the West is not 8-7 in the East. Let's be very clear about that. They are currently tied for the 10 seed with the Mavs and the Kings. And look, the Mavs are starting to look better. I know Luka's out for a few games, so that doesn't help. But the Kings are playing good basketball. Like, these are competitive teams. The teams above them, none of them are just going to roll over and lay over. I mean, the Clippers are competitive. The Grizzlies are good. The Suns will get KD back pretty soon and look decent. Nuggets are playing really well, especially when Jokic is healthy or back. I hope everything's good with him with his personal issues, but he should be back soon. And I mean, the top 4 seeds are looking awesome. The Warriors, Thunder, Rockets, and Lakers. So I'm sitting here like, all of a sudden, you start to get really worried about the Timberwolves, because things could very easily go kind of sideways these next couple weeks. If they go, say, 6-10 in their next 16 games, they could very easily be looking at sitting in the 11 or 12 seed. And that's not a spot you want to be. You do not want to be in the play-in in the Western Conference. Let's be very, very clear about that. And honestly, my biggest concern with this team is a little bit of a lack of depth. Again, I hope Naz Reid's injury is not serious, but if it is, that's going to test their depth significantly, because their only other real bigs they can play are Leonard Miller and Luka Garza, who I actually kind of like Luka Garza, but there's a speed issue there. And Leonard Miller has barely played any sort of meaningful NBA minutes whatsoever since he got into the league. I don't have a ton of hope for him being a really impactful player. Dante DiVincenzo is probably the biggest offseason addition in theory outside of Julius Randle. In fact, a lot of people, when that trade was made, were talking about how it's DiVincenzo for Cat, and Randle was almost an afterthought. And DiVincenzo's been really bad. I mean, his efficiency has been really down this year. His scoring across the board has been down. He just has not played very well, shooting 35, 32 so far this season. It's just not good enough. I mean, I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker's defensive effort, but he's not a great offensive player. I mean, he's shooting the ball really, really well this year, and you hope that continues. But it's hard to expect that to continue, and you kind of are reliant on that continuing. I mean, I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more of Terrence Shannon Jr. I feel like he's a really, really nice piece. I liked him a ton at Illinois, and I think he's a guy who could really be a real contributor on this team, but we haven't seen anything with him. Mike Conley didn't play tonight, and they're going to need him, obviously. He's still a good vet. Now, he's playing very poorly as well this season. His efficiency's way down, and I mean, again, he's 37 years old. At some point, it's kind of like Kyle Lowry. You just kind of have to expect these guys. They're great veterans. They've been really good pros for a long time, but at some point, it's going to fall off a little bit. I'm struggling with the depth of this roster a little bit. Jaden McDaniels is a very, very good defensive player, but his shooting also, I mean, has not been good this year, shooting about 31% from the three-point line. I just see a lot of issues with this team. They're not as good defensively as they were last year. They're certainly not as cohesive of a team as they were last year. Losing Cat seems to have hurt this team. The defense just does not seem to be the same level, and they are losing some games that they really should be winning. And now it gets hard. I mean, every single game, there is not a single gimme game in their next like 15 games. Then they get the Hawks, and then they get a bunch more tough games after that. Between now and about January 1st, January 2nd, when they play the Celtics, is going to be the real test for this Timberwolves season, because things will either start to go right, and they're going to start to get some big wins, or things could very easily go very wrong. And you could be looking at a Timberwolves team several games under 500 in a loaded Western Conference that is significantly underperforming expectations. And as a T-Wolves fan, I'd be really worried, because this team does not look good at all. And I have a hard time having high expectations for a roster that was expected to compete for a title this year. They don't look close to a title contender right now. And obviously things can change, but it has just not been a good start at all for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I hope y'all did enjoy the video. If y'all did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.